cigars, introspection, and pleasurable pursuits, all on today's episode of Unlock Your Wealth Today, your life fully invested. Welcome to Unlock Your Wealth Today, your life fully invested. I'm your purveyor of prosperity and host, Heather Wagenhals, and I'm making success simple for people just like you on today's episode with our first Pleasurable Pursuits feature. I'm really excited to be venturing out of this studio because what are we building all of this wealth for if we can't start enjoying some of it today? And we're going to learn how to do just that. Have you ever been mystified by cigar clubs and wine bars and fun places to go, but you don't know the first thing about how to consume them and you don't want to look stupid when you get there? Well, no worries. We've got you covered. In today's segment, we're going to be visiting the world-famous VIP Fumar Cigars Smoke Easy, and we're going to meet with the fine purveyor of this establishment, David Haddad. You will recognize him from our birthday surprise for the Renaissance Man, our regular contributor and market analyst, Jim Woods, as we launched his podcast and website, wayoftherenaissanceman.com. So if you recognize him, you're like, why does that guy seem familiar? You'll probably know him from the sneak attack that we did to the Renaissance Man with our custom-made hand-rolled cigar box for him. So we're going to venture back over there to David Haddad's place at Fumar Cigars, and we're going to learn the fine art of smoking cigars. If you've ever wanted to know what's in a cigar, am I really inhaling? Isn't it bad for you? And yeah, that looks kind of cool. Maybe I want to do that. So we're going to learn all the ins and outs and the secrets that you need to be successful at enjoying your own cigar habit. So let's take a look right now as we venture out of studio to Fumar Cigars in Phoenix, Arizona.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having us, David.
Yeah.
Who's this guy?
That's Bob. He's our resident cigar store Indian. Everybody's got to have one. Bob's got a steeped history in travel and been kind of all over the place with us. So he kind of guards the front door, make sure the bad guys stay away. This is our retail operations and what looks like a traditional cigar lounge. Got all the knickknacks and all the paddywhack that you need, tools. This is our walk-in humidor for retail, and in here you'll find about 700 lines of cigars. Okay, so now, this you would think might be all we have, but no, there's more. Because remember, this is a Prohibition-era Smoke Easy. So if you look around the room, you find the hidden cabinet, and you find out what somebody with a little too much time on their hands can do.
I'm looking. Am I getting close?
You're really close. Come on over.
Oh, here we go.
We have a little bit of
Ooh.
a hidden room behind the cabinet on the wall.
Look at the door with the
So we have a work. The front walk-in is the retail operations where you would buy cigars to enjoy. Back here is where we actually make the magic happen.
So when we talk about the fine art of cigars, because it's certainly an art and a craft, and somebody is interested in beginning their journey into the wonderful world of cigar smoking, what do they need to know first?
Well, learning how to enjoy a cigar is completely different than any other type of smoking or enjoyment of tobacco products. Cigars and cigarettes are as different as beer and root beer. Cigars are root beer. So it's all about the taste and flavor, about taking some time to yourself. Self-reflection is very important when it comes to the enjoyment of a cigar. It's less about the addiction because cigars are a non-addictive habit. It is something that you do for pleasure through the taste and flavor components and through the time to yourself or with friends in some kind of journey that you may be on. In creating cigars, we make them in lots of different blends, tastes, shapes, and sizes to appeal to a broad section of the public that might enjoy a cigar. The first thing that somebody would want to do is probably start on something that is nice and mild and easy to smoke, and learn the habit of how to enjoy a cigar, because it's all about how it feels in tactile in your hand, how you feel it looks on you. Size matters. The shape of a cigar makes a difference. As you can see, we've made several different cigars here, that are the ones that I make, and they all are different. They're different colors, they're different sizes, they're different shapes, and they taste different. Through the mechanics of the making of the cigar, we actually can, like a wine or a vintner, create blends that deliver taste and flavor portfolios that appeal to a broad section of the public.
So give us an example of what goes into every cigar. What are the components of a cigar?
So that's a great question. So cigars are generally made up of 3 different types of tobacco. Within that, there is one segment that's usually a blend of 3 different types of tobacco in of itself. The plant, grown all over the world, is very specific to the country and origin of that tobacco plant. So tobacco's grown in the Dominican Republic, or for one part of the cigar, the Ecuador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Cameroon, West Africa, Sumatra, Cuba, and Connecticut are the big ticket ones for what we call the wrapper, the leaf on the outside. So if you look down here at the cigars that we have here, you have different colors and different shapes, okay? But every one of them starts off using filler tobacco, tobacco that goes on the inside, which is here. You have 3 different types, blends, and they all come from the Dominican Republic. The darker one here is for the strength of a cigar, and the inside of a cigar, this part here, delivers the taste, not the taste, but it delivers the strength, the aroma, and the bouquet. And you use that by creating a filler bunch, which takes the leaves and turns them into little straws, so that there's ways for the tobacco smoke to pathway through. And you build the tobacco until you have about 5 to 7 leads, depending on the ring gauge or the diameter of the cigar. That determines how many of the leads you're going to use. The Lieto, which is the strength of the cigar, is usually the darkest one. And the Viso and the Seco are generally for aroma and bouquet. So that's the inside of the cigar. Around that, you put what's called a binder, or capote. And then this one here is from Ecuador, and this is a 10-year-old leaf, and this would go around this, creating what we call the bunch. And the bunch goes into a mold. All cigars are shaped by molds. So by hand, we create what looks like a cylinder, and then we put it carefully into a mold that's the right size and shape that we're making. Then it creates, with pressure, over time, it becomes a very stable shape and size that you're looking for. Once it comes out of that, it looks like this, but without the final leaf on it. The final leaf, like this one here, this happens to be Connecticut Shade. This is from the Connecticut River Valley, north of Hartford, a place called the Windsor Locks. Very specific, very flavorful, mild to the taste, and the single most expensive tobacco leaf in the world. It runs about, to give you an idea, this versus this is about 8 times more expensive than this. And this is about 15 times more expensive than this. So one of these is cut down here, and a piece is cut right through the middle here. That's called the capa, or the wrapper. This lone leaf right here delivers the bulk of the taste and flavor of a cigar. So that's this leaf here that you can actually see. These 2 are made exactly the way I just described. Actually, these 3 are. And these striped ones, or barber poles we call them, actually take a second leaf and apply it with this one. It's called a Maduro. It's a much richer and more flavorful, more intense flavor on the same filler. So it changes the taste complexion, but not the strength complexion. And then you got these dark bad boys here, which are all Nicaraguan tobaccos. And that's really a bold, full-flavored cigar that has a ton of taste and flavor as well as strength. So When you build these three together, you get a finished product, and that's what they look like.
So when we think of wines or whiskeys, we hear about aging, and now you're talking about putting it into a mold. Is there a particular timeline or age process that's factored differently for different styles of cigar?
Well, the aging and the fermentation cycles for tobacco are very similar to wines, actually. So when this is harvested, for instance, this is 7-year-old leaf right here. And so when this is harvested in Connecticut, it is actually hung, one leaf sewn to a second leaf, like this, and they're actually sewn together with like a fish hook and line, and they hang it over a pole, and they put it in a curing barn actually out in the field for 45 days. And during that time, it changes from bright green, or from its green lush color that it would be harvested like, and turns into this beautiful golden brown. And then it goes from there into what they call a hand or a hecho. Okay, that's where they bundle together about 30 leaves, and they are baled. They're put into these extremely large bales that weigh about 120 pounds or so, and then they are covered with crucio, which is the husk of a palm tree. It's zero flavor, but it traps in the temperature that is building up from the decomposition that's beginning the start of the fermentation cycle. During that period of time, they'll ship it down to the Dominican Republic, and from there, it'll go through cycles of fermentation where they actually open the bale up every time it gets to about 106 degrees, and they'll shake it out, and then they'll mist a little moisture on it. And one cat's job down in the Dominican is only to pick these things up and shake them. Put a little bit of water on them, put them back in the bale. And then they rotate the bale inside and out, outside and in, and this will go on for several years. And that's what creates the unique taste and flavor of a given leaf.
So when you say moisture, is it solely water? Is it a particular type of water? Or is anything mixed in there?
Nah, just water. I mean, it's a very natural process. You got to remember, in the making of a cigar, it is completely done by hand. So from the birth of the seed, when they actually plant the seed and make it into a seedling, and then transfer it into the crop field, and then harvested ultimately about 13 to 17 weeks later, and then into the baling process, and then into the fermentation process, and then years and years of time until it gets to a guy like me that's a roller, or a cigar roller. Nothing is touched by mechanisms. It is completely done by hand, which is why there are classification called totalmente hecho a mano, totally made by hand. And it takes, on average, about 400 people 4 years to take a seed to a finished cigar. It's an amazingly labor-intensive program.
And the value of that as somebody who is coming into cigar smoking for the first time is what?
Well, the aging and the premium nature of the cigars are that they are a luxury lifestyle product. It is something that is meant to be done on occasions. It is something that is meant to be very self-reflective. So you want something that's got a ton of taste and flavor, but it's not going to burn hot. It's not going to burn in a way that gives you a harsh taste or flavor. You want to make it evoke a lot of emotion and sense of smell, and liven your senses, if you will. And all of these things that go into making of a great cigar is what makes it such a pleasurable experience. Unlike cigarettes, which are merely a delivery system for nicotine that creates an addiction 1,000 times more potent than an opiate. Cigars' nicotine is merely a taste component. It delivers virtually there's an inability in this plant, the way we cure it, the way we ferment it, the way we age it, the way we make a cigar. It is a terrible delivery system for nicotine. So you literally can't get addicted to them because less than 2% of the nicotine actually becomes absorbed into your system.
When we think about, all right, so now I'm ready, I've got disposable income, I want to start participating and appreciating the finer things. And so like wine, it sounds like tobacco has quite a range of flavors. When Gary Vaynerchuk was doing Wine TV, he popularized the idea of tasting. Can you give us a few flavors or notes that you can look for or expect, or that are kind of common in separate cigars or throughout cigars? And then maybe tell us what ones are unique or distinctive?
Sure. There's basically 5 taste components that would go into deciding your own perception of the taste and flavor of a cigar. You're looking for leather, spice, which is usually a peppery version, and a creaminess, which is going to have a tobacco taste to it, and chocolate and coffee. Those are the 5 basic taste components. And from them, you get a diversion into different tastes and flavors that you might catch notes of. No different than wine. In wines, you may be drinking a beautiful red wine, and you'll taste hints of plum, or you'll taste hints of a berry of some kind, or you can really taste the grape that comes out in it. Well, cigars are basically the same elemental taste profiles, and your taste spectrum actually is a very fixed thing. So you will taste different elements within the tobaccos as you learn how to carry the smoke on your palate. Remembering there's no value in inhaling a cigar because you're not delivering any nicotine. The idea is to get it to play on your palate, where the taste and flavor components that your mind will tell you what the taste is are on the front half of your mouth. And so getting it to wallow on your tongue and in your cavity of your mouth, and then maybe out through your nose, through your nasal cavity, allows you to taste the different elements within the smoke. On a cigar spectrum like this, generally, the lighter the cigar, the milder it is. The darker it is, the richer and bolder it is. So you're going to get a much deeper, fuller flavor when you get down to the darker spectrum. The medium body ones are going to be a little bit of both. And the milder ones are going to be a mild taste. It's going to have some hints of leather, and you're not going to get any fruit notes, but you get some coffee probably. And those are the kind of taste components that you're probably going to reach for.
Great. So what's left to do but smoke?
Amen.
All right, folks, I am going to have a little cigar here with David. Let's indulge together. So how do we smoke a cigar?
Great. So now there's an art form and a rationale to how you cut, light, and prepare a cigar, okay? And it goes back to what we were talking about before on how the construction is. So when you go to light a cigar, if you don't warm the cigar before you light it, you'll light the center. Remember we talked about how the filler is the aroma and the strength of the cigar, but the taste and flavor comes from the leaf on the outside. So if you don't warm it properly and only the center of the cigar lights in the middle, that's like drinking bourbon and tasting Everclear. Yeah.
Not a good image.
So the goal today is to warm it and cut it properly. And when cutting a cigar properly, usually what you're going to do is you're going to look at it and feel it a little bit and roll it around in your hands, kind of get used to the feel of the cigar because it's a very tactile function. And this is a very unique cigar we call the Dog Walker. And it's got a little short, stubby, closed foot here that's called a Perfecto. This is dating back to the 1880s, this shape. And it was a very, very common shape back in the early part of the smoking cigars back between 1800 and 1920 or 1930. It was very common. And the reason they brought it down to a closed foot was because lighting cigars back then, we didn't have torch lighters. We had what they call as a cedar spill. And that's a little piece of cedar. So we're going to do a little bit of both. As we're standing here in the walk-in, it's dead air. We can do this. If you're outside, you use the torch lighter because you got to win the battle. So in cutting a cigar properly, the head, which is the end that you cut, is closed. You don't want to cut too much because it's kind of like hair. You can't uncut it.
Yes, that's true.
Once it's cut, you're done. So better to cut less and then cut more if you need to. And the idea is to cut it above the shoulder. And the shoulder is where the head meets the body. That's the foot, that's the head, that's the shoulder. So you just put it on there just a little bit, and you cut it off, and you see it cuts actually to the hide. And then, with our 1800 degrees of love right here, we light a piece of Spanish cedar. Cedar is to a cigar like oak is to a red wine. It's the proper naturing and nurturing tool of the tobacco plant from its birth to the consumption. When lighting a cigar with cedar, you add no flavor that is not already common to the tobacco. And you warm it at the top of the flame, because that's where all the heat is. You dance it around until you see a... nice save. Until you see a puff of smoke. Once you see a puff of smoke, then you know it's all at the kindling point. And there it goes. And I lost the light.
Now, is the reason why this preference is to the cedar because you're worried about maybe the chemicals?
Yeah, you
from
don't
the
want to
flame?
add anything to the cigar
Okay.
that isn't already common to it. And you see how quick it lights when you warm it like that? It lights just like that. You don't need to draw a lot of heat into it. When you use a torch lighter, like I'll do here just to show you, one of the challenges you have is that 1800 degrees scalds the tobacco. It's kind of like warming lettuce with a blowtorch. Not a good idea. So all you do is you warm the end of it like this, all the way across the bottom of the cigar until it captures all of that heat. And you see the puff of smoke? And a perfect light every time. And now when smoking, you like to chew the taste. You don't want to inhale it, obviously, there's no reason to. And you want it to waft on your palate, so you don't really blow it out, you kind of push it out. And that way it doesn't have that time, otherwise it doesn't have time on your palate to let you catch the taste. And okay. Remembering that the slower you smoke, the cooler it burns, the more flavor you get. It's not like a cigarette. You're not trying to see how fast you can finish it. You're trying to see how long you can savor it. So, that way you can taste the flavor of the smoke.
It's really introspective if you think about it.
Very much so.
Like a meditative practice. It's something that you want to kind of go and really enjoy. You can do it with others, but it's about you.
It's still always going to be about self-reflection. It's about a moment of contemplation, kind of a time of peace. 45 minutes where no one can bother you, which is a good thing. Perfect. Nailed it.
I'm liking it. I'm liking it. Now, I know that there are different types of cutters out there.
Yep.
So what type did we just use this time?
So this is a butterfly cutter made by a company called Cigar, generally considered the Cadillac of the industry. And it does a straight cut. In other words, it just cuts straight across. There are two other versions of a cutter. One's called a V cut, which actually cuts a divot straight through the end of it, kind of like a V, if you will. And then there's another one called a punch cut, which actually is kind of like an apple core. And you push it down in there and twist it around a little bit and pop out a core. I'm not a big fan of either one of those. I like a straight cut so I get the full range of taste and flavor that I'm going to get. The other two is the tobacco juices accumulate as you smoke the cigar. They tend to accumulate down at the end because there's no way to burn off with a straight cut. So there you have it.
So does it concentrate the flavor or change the flavor with the tighter cuts, with less exposed, or does it affect the taste?
It does at the end of the cigar. It certainly does. When you get down to the last third of the cigar, now the tobacco juices have accumulated and accumulated and accumulated. So it's going to pick up a ton of taste and flavor and be much bolder, and it may end up making the cigar actually kind of soggy. So.
Well, this has been such an incredible time. Now, I know you have a private club here. Tell us a little bit about the experience of being at a private cigar club. What's the value in joining one or having your introspective time or your ritual time maybe with your friends at a cigar club?
Well, our club is a Prohibition-era speakeasy, and we'll give you a quick tour here in a short bit. The idea behind most cigar clubs is it's a place of retreat where the outside world and the cares, what we call dull care, if you will, that which happens outside these four walls, doesn't come inside. Inside, you're at peace. Nobody cares about what you do, where you've come from, who you are. Everybody's on a very even playing field. It's a tremendous neutralizer when it comes to a disparity. And what that means is in the military, of the cigar clubs that we established for the military during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, were always built on a very single premise, and that was that rank would be respected but not acknowledged. And so inside the cigar club, everybody was the same, and that they could enjoy and they could have a chance to communicate and visit with higher ranks and not have to worry about the worries of normal protocols that go along with being in the military. Inside the four walls of the clubs, rank is respected but not acknowledged. In other words, you don't have to go through all the traditional protocols. It's more important to be on a familial level so that you can communicate and talk about family and life and the future, past experiences that you've had, your favorite cigar moment, or not about cigars at all. But it allows people to be very comfortable with each other. And command structure loved it because they could actually talk to the guys that are down there carrying the weight and get some real feel for what the grunts and the people pounding the path are really thinking in their day at work, if you will. So in a cigar club, the idea is that everybody's kind of on an even playing field. So there is no rank when it comes to older members, younger members, or any of that kind of thing. Everybody's on an even playing field because they're in there for the love of the cigar.
Well, and from a leadership perspective, I'm thinking that that's probably really great because half of the time you see in even corporate structure that the people higher up the food chain aren't connected to or have any idea what the rank and file are thinking. And that really affects your leadership because if there's dissent and you can't connect, that's an issue. That's really great that cigar clubs can provide that.
Yeah, and when we do about 400 events a year, corporate destination events that we produce, and one of the things that's wonderful about the cigar lounge that we would create for a given company is that the people that are at the top of the pecking order and the sales folks and the people that are working in their business all have a chance to sit and mingle, and more often than not what it does is if somebody lower on the food chain gets a chance to talk one-on-one with Bob and not Mr. So-and-so, they have a chance to really connect with them. So when it comes to the tough battle, they're not afraid to follow that guy into battle because that's the guy that he knows personally. And they have a mutual and common respect and bond over the cigar. It's been that way for centuries. Actually, it's been a very common tool throughout the last 4 centuries where people from different playing fields can get together and actually be on the same playing field.
Now, I'm really glad that you brought this up because there's something pretty spectacular about what you do with the military. Can you share your military connection and the things that you do, because you have given away an astronomical number of cigars. So can you just share a little bit about your connection to the military and why it's so important what you're doing?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. So back in the 1990s, I actually bought the logo rights for the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard to apply them to cigars and cigar bands. Back then, they didn't really know what they had, and I got a steal. We thought it would be a good business opportunity to sell Army cigars to the Army guys on the bases, etc., from the Air Force bases on down. And it was actually a failed experiment. We made a great cigar. We charged $5 for it, but the people on the bases didn't have any money, so they wanted 5 cigars for $1 and not a $5 cigar. So we kind of missed the mark on the marketing side of things, but then 9/11 happened. And friends, family, people we knew that had sons and daughters in the fight asked me if I would send some cigars to their soldier that was serving downrange. And we said sure, every time. Before we knew it, we were saying yes to everybody. I looked at my wife and I told her, you know what, I'm going to make a decision right now. And we made a business decision that we would never sell one again. To date, we've donated 1.1 million cigars to our service members deployed downrange. I actually went to Iraq and Afghanistan and put smiles on kids' faces when they least expected it. The privilege of a lifetime to be able to strap on the boots, hear the incoming, get scared out of my wits, and deliver a little taste of home that the guys and the gals could step back and get a moment of peace when the time was right. And we established clubs I ended up being a board member for the USO, and the USO would take packages downrange of celebrities, ambassadors, if we will. We were all considered ambassadors to go and provide goodwill. And so we established cigar clubs that were actually blessed by the military, because there's no alcohol in the Middle Eastern theater of operations. Decision they made to be culturally in tune, if you will, with the locals. And so the cigars became a very pivotal piece of the puzzle, because without an officers club or an enlisted club to blow off some steam, the cigar clubs became very important. In fact, became the largest group functions within the military in very short order. We ended up with about 47 clubs between Iraq and Afghanistan, several aircraft carrier groups, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Germany, and then it evolved backwards and came to CENTCOM in Tampa, Fort Bragg, et cetera, et cetera. So the clubs that we established, the Victory Cigar Club in Baghdad and the Taliban Cigar Aficionado Club, became very popular, still have life, and we've been providing the cigars ever since. So that was one piece of the puzzle. After coming back from the Middle East, the opportunity for us to do more evolved, so we established a nonprofit foundation called Friends of Freedom, and Friends of Freedom provides an array of services to military families, both veterans and active duty, that include morale programming, where the Cigars for Soldiers would be, and compassionate programming, so when they're in distress, whether it's through airline miles, that American Airlines, a great American company that supports our veterans absolutely to the highest degree, and assorted other groups. The Gary Sinise Foundation and myself established several other programs to develop ways to deliver services that included building houses for severely wounded guys, smart houses, if you will, smart homes, and then the compassionate side to be anything from emergency rent assistance to just helping them with daycare or anything else. So there's a lot of different things going on underneath the umbrella of Friends of Freedom, and we just try and do our part and give back a little bit. I never served. I was born in the Air Force. My father was a captain, and I spent the last 16 years trying to pay it forward. And something that I believe in, which is active citizenship, and that means that each person has a role to play. How you play that role is up to you, but to pay it forward is also a demonstration to your children that if they do well, they must do good. And we have proven that over and over again, and my kids are a testament to that. They are all good citizens and try and give back as well.
Well, I think that that's a really incredible cause, and you know, you're very fortunate to be able to have that opportunity to be able to connect with people. I find that when I had the opportunity to personally pay it forward, that I feel something significant out of it. You know, there's a personal value. It's not just about what I've given away, but I'm still taking away something because I know that I did good. That's, right. I think, a core piece of benevolence that seems to get lost in society sometimes. So that's a tremendous and generous place for you to be. But I'd like to talk more about what's going on with my cigar, because as we're smoking, as we're having this incredible conversation, I'm noticing that the flavor is changing a little bit. Tell me why that is. Tell me what's going on in my mouth. Tell me what's going on with the cigar as it's burning down.
Your palate is starting to taste different components of it, and it also takes about an inch of a cigar before it really starts getting all the flavor and taste that you're looking for. And so as you see, she's burning down, and all of a sudden it's starting to gather its taste and flavor. She's into what they call a bowl, or the bulk of the cigar, and now she's actually getting the full array of tastes and flavors from the different types of tobacco that go into it. And she's smoking it nice and slow, so it's creating a nice long ash, which is a good sign of great construction. Thank you very much. And it also gives you the full range of taste and flavor that's going to be on this. And it also is accumulating some taste and flavor as it goes. So as it burns, it actually evolves. They're generally broken into thirds: the first third, the second third, and the third third of a cigar. And each one of them have a little bit of taste difference to it. So, and it's all very personal. I could tell you what you're supposed to taste, but it's kind of like a sommelier telling you what you're supposed to drink. What you like is not necessarily what I like. And so, there was a great old chef on TV when we were kids. It was called the Cajun Chef.
I remember the Cajun Chef.
Okay, the Cajun Chef used to be in overalls, and he had a big stock pot. And he was a guy from Louisiana, and he had a big old stock pot, and he'd be cranking it around, and he'd drink wine from a jug. And he always would say that the best wine in the world is the wine you like.
Well, there you go.
So I always take cigars to the same level.
So you brought up a good point about construction. So I've just taken and I've invested my hard-earned money into a quality constructed cigar. And now I'm taking this box home. How do I care for my cigars? Because it's like a pet. You got to care for it, right? If you want it to stay well.
Well, we live here in the desert. The desert is like the Antichrist to tobacco. There's very few things worse than Phoenix, Arizona, except maybe Baghdad.
Yeah, I was just to say Iraq.
And the tobacco, even as we're sitting here in a humidor that is a custom-made piece generating a ton of humidity from this piece of equipment over here, it still is not enough to satisfy the tobacco. Cigars are generally kept in humidors, and a humidor is a specifically designed piece of equipment that actually does certain things. It's lined in Spanish cedar, and Spanish cedar that we use to light it, same thing, harnesses the taste and flavor, and if it's moistened, if that cedar is moistened, it actually puts moisture into the cabinet and keeps the cigars at a very stable 70% humidity, which is your target. Excuse me. And why is that? Because the cigar doesn't leave the factory or the fabrica until it reaches what's called 14% moisture content. In other words, the cigar is perfect when there's about 14% moisture left in the cigar. We want to stabilize that by how we hold it. And there's many ways to do that if you don't have a humidor, which most people that are beginning don't have. You can do something that's an old version. Sorry, I had to catch up.
I know.
It's an old school way of, at your cigar store, they can provide you, let me sneak over here.
Where do you want?
Now, they can provide you with, sorry about that.
No worries.
This is Spanish cedar that comes in the boxes as a divider between the trays, the levels of a cigar in a box. If you take this stuff right here, put a little moisture on it, it'll soak right into the wood, and you can drop that into either a Ziploc bag or a, and by the way, this is free at every cigar store. They generally don't tell you they have it because they sell lighters for a living, okay? And they sell humidors for a living. But I'm here to tell you, you don't need it. So you can put this in a Tupperware, generally not too much bigger than the number of cigars that you have. And you put one of these little magic things, which you can get from your cigar store. It's called a Bovita pack. And there's actually bigger ones and smaller ones and all sorts of different sizes and shapes. And you can drop that right in there and store your cigars in that Tupperware. And if you keep it in the bathroom where you shower, that's the most humid place in the house. It'll be good for a long time.
Now, do we leave the cellophane wrapper on like these, or should we take them off? Leave them exposed.
You know, most people are not in the business of aging cigars; they're in the business of smoking cigars. So only goofballs like me collect very rare stuff. In this cabinet behind me, there are 100-year-old cigars that are worth thousands of dollars a piece. And we've been aging those myself for about 20 years. But they're literally 100 years old, some of them. And so most people will buy enough cigars that would equal, if they're going to store them at home, the equivalent of about 3 months worth of usage. So if you smoked a cigar a week, that'd be about 4 cigars a month. So 12 would be the number that you would probably want to keep at home. That way you could share with your friends if they came over or not. That way you aren't overbuying and then underusing, because sometimes you may forget about it. Well, this kind of solution will last for some time, but at the end of the day, you really need to kind of burn off what's in there and get new ones and kind of go through that cycle again until you get a humidor. And then when you get to graduate to a humidor, that's a whole other lesson.
So as we're trying to find our palate, as you so said, what should we do? Should we try one style or should we try a variety? Like what's a first good gateway style cigar that we should start with to kind of figure out where we are flavor profile wise?
Sure. Okay. So always start on the mild end where we are here, okay, with the Connecticut Shade. The Connecticut Shade, every cigar store will carry them, and they are always known as the nice mild cigar. It's kind of an entry-level cigar. But the taste and flavors and the expense of these can range anywhere from, in Arizona, from $6 to $16 per cigar. And it's a great taste and flavor and a great place to start to learn how to smoke and not inhale and not do things that'll get you woozy, because the actual body of the smoke that you're inhaling or taking into your cavity has some carbon monoxide in it, because it does. And so if you don't pace yourself, drink a lot of water while you're smoking, then you can get real high. And that's really a carbon monoxide high. It's kind of like sucking a tailpipe. You don't want to do that, okay? And then the next time you come in, you say, well, that was good, but I want to try something with a little more flavor. Not something necessarily stronger. Remember, the strength comes from the filler leaves. The leaf on the outside is the taste. So maybe you would go to something like the Barber Poles, or a Cameroon West African wrapper, or a Sumatran wrapper. That's going to be a nice medium body cigar, and see if you can taste the difference. Because they all have their own little nuances to them. And then once you get to a place where the tolerance for the quote-unquote high that you might get is at kind of your peak, that's where you want to stabilize for a little bit, taste different ones in the same genre. And over time, you may graduate to a more bold, full-flavored cigar as your palate becomes more educated. Until then, it's kind of like when you started drinking wine. As a kid, you'd drink white wine because it was cold, or pink wine because it was fruity. And by the time you were done, we're all sitting around drinking Zinfandels and Pinot Noirs, because our palate and our body has acclimated to the taste and flavor components that go into those.
Outstanding. Well, I've been excited to have this time to spend with you. I've had the opportunity to look around, and so I'm thinking that maybe we should go grab some bourbon and celebrate.
Let's go.
Now that we've finished the segment.
Okay, that sounds like a plan to me. Actually, they go well together. We actually bourbon infused cigars, so we actually make cigars with bourbon vaped into them.
So I'm a bourbon girl, but what are there particular types of alcohol that go better with cigars? Is there stuff to avoid, or is this another flavor?
If I tell you that you really should be drinking bourbon with this, but you only drink scotch, doesn't matter how good the bourbon is, you want scotch.
Right.
And I can tell you that port wine would really be a good finish with one of these cigars. But again, if I like bourbon and I don't drink port wine, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to enjoy it. I always say grab what you like. Trying to pair a cigar with a particular beverage or food, and remembering that the same cigar is going to taste different after a steak dinner than it is after a tilapia or a whitefish dinner, because there's a ton of fat that gets laden on your tongue if you eat a ribeye.
Oh, my favorite.
Okay.
I like the fatty ribeyes.
And that fat is commingling with the smoke. It's going to taste different. No different than why a sommelier will recommend a given wine to go with a given food, because the fat content in the food distributes across your palate, and then the wine is affected by that taste. Okay? So the learning of the enjoyment of the two, cigars are a little bit antithetical to that. So that's why I say drink what you like, smoke what you like.
Outstanding. Well, we're going to do just that. If folks are interested in Fumar cigars, if they want to either come here or if they want to be able to, can they order online? Where can they get them? Nope.
I'm not an online seller.
So you got to come to Arizona?
No, we ship anywhere. That's easy. www.fumarcigarsusa.com is our website. But it's an informational website. It kind of tells you about all the things that we do. From our events productions to our large-scale programming, where we do Barrett-Jackson and Phoenix Open and the Masters, and several other PGA events around the country. Excuse me. And then it also talks about how you can have an event at your house, and our rare and collectible collections of both Prohibition-era spirits and pre-embargo Cuban cigars from prior to 1962. All sorts of different rare collections in the inventory. So that's what our website is for. But if you want something and you want us to help you, we actually have a personal services division where we actually get your taste profile, ask you some questions, and send you an array of cigars that we keep a log of. And then you can tell us what you like, and the next time we can either add more of those or change it up a little bit, depending on what you want. So we have a personal services division that's dedicated to doing nothing more than making sure that each client feels like they're the only client. If you come to our place, we're in North Phoenix at, can I do this?
Yes.
2010 West Parkside Lane. And it's a very nondescript warehouse that I own that we'll take you on a tour of here. That Disney set designers came in and took advantage of me being an old theater guy and creating a stage, if you will, that looks like you just stepped back into the 1920s. Prohibition was a very, very unique time in our history, and there's a lot of legend and lore and that goes along with that. So I wanted to create kind of that ambiance, and that's what we have in our club. So please come in. We carry about 700 lines of cigars. We make our own. If you want your own custom-made cigar, we can do that too. There's some examples. We actually are always in production of custom banding and custom creating cigars for groups. So we do about 500,000 cigars a year in our private services and event production company. That's the stuff that we make. And we can actually create, excuse me, a different look for any cigar that you want.
Well, and I can give you a personal testimonial too, because we had the opportunity to surprise our regular contributor and market analyst, Jim Woods, the Way of the Renaissance Man, with his own very own custom box of Renaissance Man cigars, which went over famously, as a matter of fact. So the things that you do are just incredible, both on the professional side with creating the mystique and the ambiance. Is there a secret knock when we come here that we need? Because it's like in that nondescript, you know, we've got that whole incognito sort of feel.
So we have one rule only. Everything costs a smile. No frowners here. People of joy and goodwill. Those who are welcome. Anybody with a bad taste in their mouth, you can go somewhere else.
Well, thank you again so much for our time today, David. And for those of you without a pencil, never fear, unlockyourwealthtoday.com is here, where you can visit David's show page, get all the links to his website, and so much more. For the maestro of Moolah, Michael Terry, and today's guest, David Haddad, I'm Heather Wagenhals. Now go out and unlock your wealth today.